Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Come with me as we step into the deep, dark forest of fear, and let's hope that we see sunrise in the morning. Tonight's show is a creepy backwoods and creature experiences and encounters. Sometimes going into the deep, dark forests or way out in the backcountry is a bad idea, as lurking in the shadows or the trees around you, watching, waiting, is creatures of pure nightmare. Tonight's show is a compilation of those creatures. I hope you guys enjoy the show. Of course, as ever, please do comment down below and like and share. Without further ado, let's get into tonight's first story, entitled First Experience. Let's get straight into that. I was about 6 years old when I was first interested in the paranormal because of an experience. I lived in a 2-story house with 3 bathrooms and 4 bedrooms. The master bedroom was my parents' room. The second largest room was my grandfather's. The medium-sized room was rented out to a college student, and the smallest room was my older brother's. Since the medium room used to be my brother's and the smallest was mine, I was moved into one of the room-like closets in the master bedroom. It was a decent living space, and as a small 6-year-old, I made no complaints, even though I missed my original room. When I was younger, my parents never let me watch anything close to horror movies or shows. I wasn't even allowed to see Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. So, the most I knew was sheet ghosts, witches, stereotypical werewolves, and stereotypical vampires, not the Twilight ones. None of them scared me as a kid because I'd been reassured multiple times they're not real, and the only thing I should fear is my brother getting a mask or chasing me around as a joke. One night, I was finding it hard to sleep, so I just lied there in bed facing the wall. I listened to my dad's loud snoring behind the thin walls of my room. My mum and my big brother were watching TV in the living room. The college student who stayed in the medium room was out with friends, and my grandpa was staying with my aunt out of town. I remember being extremely bored and wishing I could just fall asleep. Suddenly, the room got really cold. I found it weird because there was no vents in the room and it was actually a warm night. I decided not to pay any attention to it and curled up into a ball to try and keep warm. After what felt like hours, but was most likely just a couple of minutes, I started to hear slow, heavy breathing. It sounded like a little girl. At that point, I started getting really scared. None of my friends were over to play a joke on me, and I was the youngest in the house anyway. I tried to just shake it off as my imagination and closed my eyes. Chills ran down my spine as the breathing not only continued, but increased and was soon going down my neck and ears. I trembled and squeezed my ears and eyes shut. I was frozen in absolute fear, mentally praying that I was just dreaming, just to make sure I had pinched my arm. I wanted to scream and cry because it wasn't a dream. Eventually, I got so scared that I shot out of bed and ran downstairs as quickly as my little legs could carry me without falling. My face felt hot and I was on the verge of tears. My mum looked at me with a confused yet upset expression. "What are you doing up? You could have woken up your dad," she scolded. My brother next to her on the couch gave me a shit-eating grin, he and I both knowing I was in trouble. I ignored my mum's scolding and frantically explained what happened. I felt like something was watching me while I told my mum and brother, but I didn't look behind, out of sheer fear. My mum shook her head at me, seeing it as just a child's imagination. My brother kept grinning at me as he spoke. "You probably just heard my TV, stupid." I only know it wasn't his TV. I didn't see any light coming from his room when I passed it. He almost always kept his door open. "It wasn't your TV, and I'm not stupid," I replied with a frustrated whine. I wanted them to believe me, but they didn't. That night, I was way too afraid to sleep in my room, so I got a blanket and curled up on the smaller couch in the living room. This has been on my mind for so many years now, and I often ask myself, did that really happen? Who was that little girl? Was it even a little girl? What do you think? Was it just a 6-year-old child's imagination, or was it really an experience? Personally, I count it as an experience with the paranormal. There's something in the woods in Slade, Kentucky. I know this is Reddit no sleep and everything's presumed true, so I came here. My friends and I are looking for help and answers. I won't be using any of our real names in this story. I'd like to begin by saying that I personally wasn't actually present for the first part of the story. I will be telling this part from a third-person perspective. But first, some background. We are all residents at Louisville, all in our 20s, and we're best friends. There's me, my boyfriend Byron, Jess and Nico, who are married, and Cara. We love to spend our days together hanging out at Jess and Nico's house, smoking, watching movies and playing board games, and just enjoying each other's company. We're all pretty open-minded people who believe in the paranormal and love the thrill of being scared. We're all also huge bundles of anxiety, as millennials trying to get their shit together often are. So, we like to get ourselves out of Louisville every once in a while to be closer to nature and relax. Our favourite place to go is Red River Gorge. For those of you unfamiliar with the area, Red River Gorge is an area popular with rock climbers, hikers and campers in eastern Kentucky. It is part of the Daniel Boone National Forest and immediately near Natural Bridge State Park. It has dense forests and dozens of natural sandstone arches. The views there are absolutely breathtaking, and it's definitely one of my favourite places in the world. It's one of those places that makes you feel small and insignificant in a peaceful way. Here's where I'll start the story. It began last summer when Jess, Nico and Cara took a spur-of-the-moment trip to the gorge. They planned to make a 2-hour drive, do a night hike or climb of the Natural Bridge Trail, and drive back home. Slade is one of the darkest places in Kentucky, free from light pollution. So going to the top of a natural bridge on a clear night gives you a gorgeous view of the Milky Way. And for what they described, it was a clear night. Until they had already started their hike, they all described feeling uneasy while walking the trail, like something was watching them. They all also noticed that the sky seemed to have gone completely cloudy. The key part of the story is the noise that they kept hearing. It sounds like a human doing a bird call, almost like that 2-part whistle someone would use to call their dog. But it was much, much louder and seemed to be coming from a different side of the trail each time. When they were almost to the top, the best place to stargaze, they saw a girl coming down. She was wearing a sundress, flip-flops and a headlamp. She didn't have a backpack or a water bottle or any other people with her. Now, let me be clear. There is no way that this girl did this hike by herself, in the middle of the night, with no source of hydration, wearing a dress and flip-flops. There are many steep inclines and we always have to stop a few times to drink water and catch our breath. The girl came down toward them and stopped. The other strange detail about this encounter is that all 3 of their headlamps and all 3 of their flashlights were pointed at her. But she didn't squint or shield her eyes. It gets pitch black there at night, and we use bright lights to navigate. Jess said that she attempted to greet her and ask her how she was, to try and make light of an awkward and creepy situation. She was also concerned that the girl might be lost in the woods and need help. "Oh, I'm fine." From what they said, she had a robotic voice and strange, forced mannerisms. After answering them, she continued to walk down past them, stopped again for a moment, and then disappeared around the trail corner. At this point, everyone is creeped out. They keep climbing to the top, and once they get there, they try to calm down and look at the stars. After a few minutes, they decide to head back down. Everyone feels uneasy, and there's too many clouds to see anything anyway. While they are heading back down, Nico keeps catching eye shine in the trees with his flashlight. They keep hearing rustling in the bushes and that whistling noise again. All these things could be chalked up to wildlife, so no huge deal. And that's when they see it. Nico sees it at first. What the fuck is that? Jess and Kara immediately turn with their flashlights, and all of the lights hit it. They described it as huge, lanky, bipedal creature that stood at least 9 feet tall. It was crouched down in a stalking position, but stood up to the full height after being spotted by the whole group. And it had shiny white skin, almost similar to a dolphin. Nobody could see any distinguishable facial features very well, but everyone seemed to think it had 2 pit-like eyes. They all reported feeling frozen and a powerful sense of absolute dread. Nico finally got all of them to run down the trail until they reached the parking lot, where they all heard crashing noises coming from the woods behind them. When they got to the car and started driving away, they were all shocked to see that the hike up and down had somehow taken them twice as long as it normally did, despite the fact that they had headed back down sooner than usual and also ran most of the way down. It was like they had lost chunks of time. They also noticed that the sky was completely clear again, not a cloud in sight, just like when they had first started the hike. Fast forward to this past Friday night, April 6th, 2018. I texted Jess early that morning to see if she wanted to hang out after everybody got off to work that evening. She said that she did, and that she wanted to drive to the gorge and try and do a night hike and get some pizza at Miguel's, one of the only restaurants that seems to exist in Slade. But they have the most amazing pizza and breakfast. I agreed that that sounded great and told her she could come and pick me up from my apartment when she got off work. Byron was going to be working a little later than everyone else and decided to opt out. He said that he didn't want us to hold up and needed to be up early in the morning anyway. Jess and Nico picked me up from around 5:15 and we headed over to Kara's house to meet her and hang out there for a bit. She has the biggest car and will be driving all of us there. We all got in, stopped for cigarettes, water and snacks, and we're on our way to the gorge. I absolutely adore road trips with my friends. We sing and talk and chain smoke all the way there. It's one of the most blissful feelings in the entire world. Everyone is happy to be in each other's company on a nice night and ready to be out in nature. We arrive in Slade around 8:15 and go straight to Miguel's to fill up on pizza before our hike. It's crowded as usual, but a little more so because it's spring break. There's people from all walks of life, from families with young children to groups of 20-somethings like us, to older people who've made Slade their permanent home. I think it's important to say that we are all in very good moods. We were happy, stoned, stuffed with the world's best pizza, and in a beautiful place surrounded by people that were also happy. Everything felt very serene. We finished eating around 9 and pile in the car. Kara starts driving towards the natural bridge trail. Some of the roads are barricaded due to some kind of roadwork, I'm assuming, so it takes us a little longer to get there. Now, in the car is where I start to feel a little weary. Nothing too serious, but something feels wrong in the back of my mind. I try to ignore it until Jess and Kara start talking about how they too feel a little bit scared. I do too. I just didn't want to be the one who said something and accidentally freaked everyone else out, I said, giggling. I'm trying pretty hard to just pass off my feelings as nervous jitters. Nico doesn't seem scared. He keeps telling us it'll all be okay, and we agree. There are 4 of us, and it's unlikely anything bad would happen anyway. We finally get to the parking lot. Kara turns off the engine and we all start to take the things out and put things in our backpacks to prepare to start the hike. I am feeling more and more nervous by the second. Something feels wrong. I'm not scared at this point, but I do not feel like I should go in the woods. I have to say something. So, I kind of don't want to do this. This is the same trail that you guys saw that thing on, and I feel really weird right now. Everyone is silent, but Kara and Jess seem to feel the same way. Do you guys want to hike to Chimney Top Rock instead? Jess suggests. Nico shrugs his shoulders. Kinda really wanted to do this one. I think we could do it and we'll feel better afterwards. Jess decides to take out her pendulum and pendulum board to make the decision. For those who don't know, a pendulum board is kind of like a Ouija board. Jess's is a small piece of wood that says yes and no. She hangs her pendulum above the board and asks it a question, and the idea is that the pendulum will sway towards the correct answer. We're superstitious people, so when the pendulum quivers towards no, we decide to drive to Chimney Top Rock instead. Nico seems disappointed, but is willing to compromise and do the different trail. As we're driving towards our destination, we start to talk a little more about the creature they saw. Nothing too serious, just trying to make light of the conversation. As we're doing this, I hear a whistling noise. I didn't connect the dots at this point. Remember, I wasn't on the original trip with this noise. But I did know that I was all of a sudden terrified. We all looked around to see if everyone else had heard what we did, and asking her, "Did you hear that?" And "What was that?" When it happened again. This time it was louder, and this time my friends all froze. "That's the noise! That's the fake bird call we heard that night," Kara said, wide-eyed. We were all dead silent, staring straight ahead of us for a few seconds while Kara continued driving through the dark, windy forest road. And then, readers of No Sleep, I shit you motherfucking not, we heard it again, and it was so fucking loud. It was clear, crystal clear and penetrating. It was literally so loud that it sounded like it was coming from inside the car, and yet distant. Like it was coming from the woods to our right. I have no explanation for how this whistle managed to defy logic, but I can tell you that we all had a meltdown. There were tears in our eyes. I started sinking lower and lower, trying to get as close to the floor of the back seat as possible. I cannot put into words the feeling of absolute dread and hopelessness that a whistle instilled in me. I'd like to say fight or flight kicked in, but it was worse, because as soon as I heard that third whistle, I knew. I knew that I had no chance if whatever made that noise wanted me. I knew that it was smart. I knew that it wanted us to hear that noise. It was so intentional, and all I know is it is not normal for whistling sounds to have the ability to make 4 grown adults cry and sob out of fear. We were all trembling for hours. I truly did not think I was going to make it out of there. After that, we drove around in the woods a little bit more. Why? I have no idea. We all felt like we had to, almost. And that's really scary to me because despite feeling a fear so strong, we were all still willing to try and find more. It was a magnetic feeling, and one that I have no sane explanation for. Even now, sitting safely in my Lewisfield bed, I want to go back. I want to find out what it is. I want to interview locals and look for clues. I have some theories, but none of them match up together, so that's why I'm here. First of all, I fully believe that my friends may have entered some sort of alternative reality last summer. This would explain the strange, quick onset and disappearance of clouds and the time that they seem to have missing on their arrival back to the car. I don't know what that girl was, but I don't think she was human. I really have no idea what the creature is. Sasquatch was my first thought, but my friends all described it as being hairless, so that doesn't fit. If anyone can be of any help, please let me know. We need information, and I know this isn't over. Thank you so much. It almost caught us. I live in the Pacific Northwest. After I graduated high school in 2005, I took a motorcycle trip with my dad. We did some sightseeing, camped outside in Montana, just were free spirits for a week. It was great. We were on the home stretch, somewhere in the Washington Mountains. We were not on the highway since we wanted to take the scenic routes. We decided to stop at a small campsite off the road. I don't recall if there were any official signs up, but there was a restroom, just a cement block wall with a trough and no ceiling, and a few Native Americans who were asking for donations to keep the campgrounds clean and in working order. Judging by the state of the campgrounds, they didn't get many donations. I can tell you that the campsite is no longer there due to a mudslide that completely and utterly wiped out the road and the side of the mountain. I learned about that when my dad and I wanted to revisit years later. It's no longer accessible. We were sore and our muscles needed a stretching, so we decided to walk a bit. There was a thin strip of grassy field on the other side of the road, and the edge of the woods was across that field. The field had only a few cows grazing in it. We decided to take a walk and enjoy nature for a bit, since it was particularly beautiful in the area. The trees were dense, and the moss hanging from them made it seem almost like walking through a fairy tale, magical and serene. There were some trails, but they weren't man-made. Probably elk trails. It was a nice walk through the trees. The trails began to get tougher, climbing over some fallen trees and navigating sinkholes and stuff like that. We decided it might be a good time to turn around since we had gone in quite a ways. That's when I spotted it. Something that didn't belong in a forest at all. It was a car. Not a modern car. This had to have been from the 1930s. We could see it ahead, off the trail and in a small clearing. We had to get a better look. My dad and I are big into the old car scene, car shows and hot rods. This was too cool to pass up. So, we waded through the brush, ferns and bushes to get to a closer look. We were excited and talking to each other about the car. How did it get here? So far away from the road. When it was parked here, maybe there wasn't any trees. Or maybe it had followed a logging road or trail and got stuck. There was no way it could have gotten this deep in the trees. It had to have been sitting here since Prohibition. At this point, we were getting real close. Our conversation had distracted us until now. But when we stopped and took a look at the car, we knew something wasn't right. The car wasn't just a rusted, derelict sitting in the woods. We could see that the doors had been pried off and laying in the dirt. The interior had been completely torn out and the inside was a nest. I'm not talking about a bird's nest. This was a nest for something big, really big. The branches were weaved together and some of them were thicker than my forearm. They were completely weaved together in the middle of the car, with one of the sides as an entrance point. The branches seemed to be caked from the inside with mud to make some sort of plaster walls. There was hair everywhere, on the floor of the nest, within the branches, and tufts of it on the ground near the entrance. Then, the smell hit us. It may not have been a mud at all. It was feces. It had to be. It was awful, a thick and heavy smell. Imagine being sprayed by a skunk, but instead of the famous skunk smell, it was something different. Musky and acrid. Absolutely nasty. At this point, we were getting scared. I asked my dad if he thought a bear did it. No, definitely not. And bears don't have the dexterity to create a nest. Well, not like that. And a human wouldn't have done this. Especially would not have lined a nest with feces. But something made this car its home. And that's when we heard it. The silence. There was no bird, no insect, not a living creature making a single sound. We heard a deafening silence. It was so quiet, I found myself holding my breath. I turned to my dad and said, maybe we should go. So we turned in the direction of the trail, the car behind us, and started heading back. We didn't make it more than 2 steps when something snapped a branch behind us. We froze. The crack of this branch was like a gunshot. Then another snap and another. It wasn't small branches, not the quick snap of a branch under our feet. This sounded like the splintering of a log, a thick, heavy branch, something heavy and strong. I don't remember who started running first, but we broke into a full sprint, and so did the thing behind us. We were racing between trees, dodging saplings and jumping over fallen logs. Whatever was behind us did not bother moving around the obstacles. It simply smashed through them. Wood was being splintered behind us. I could see the tops of thin saplings fall in my peripheral vision and spring halfway back up when it passed them. It was just knocking everything over as it was chasing us. I have never been so terrified. We finally burst out of the woods and into a small strip of field that was separating us from the campground. We were both in full sprint mode, and I remember looking sideways at my dad, seeing how red his face was. I could see the veins popping out of his forehead. He was not a fit man, but there was nothing that would have stopped him. Usain Bolt would have had to run for his money. Now, if having some sort of monster chasing us wasn't bad enough, as we ran through the field, we noticed a huge bull among the cows. This bull came running straight at us. I'm thinking to myself, great, I get killed by a bull or eaten by whatever this thing is behind me. Either way, I'm dead. But the bull then makes a detour and decides whatever is chasing us is a bigger threat and runs straight for it. I believe that bull saved their lives. We get to the other side of the field and make it part way up to the slight hill to the campground. I feel like I can finally afford to look behind me. There's nothing. The bull is fixated at something in the trees and it's too difficult to see what it is. Whatever it was, the bull stopped it from following us across the field. My dad and I collapsed and laid there for several long minutes, gasping for breath. My lips and nose were tingling and numb, and my side felt like I was being stabbed. It was a long time before I finally sat up and helped my dad up. The natives at the campground saw us run out the woods and saw the bull run at the thing chasing us. They said it was a Sasquatch. We listened to them tell us about the Sasquatch. They lived in the mountains and were always very careful around humans. Sometimes they'd scare us away if we get too close, but they never harm humans. But sometimes the winters are harsh, and it snows heavy in the mountains, and it's hard to find food. Some Sasquatch in desperation will kill their own kind and eat them to prevent themselves from starving. The ones who do this become feral, sick, and cursed. They grow thin, lose their hair and become sickly, yet are still incredibly fast and powerful. They believe that is what chased us. We left the campground in a quiet and serious mood. No more sightseeing, and no more lazy rest stops. We made the 8-hour drive back home and slept. We talked about the encounter with family and friends, but nobody believed us. Years later, we decided to go back and take pictures, do some investigating, and show the car and the nest to prove what happened. The road and the campground had been wiped out during a mudslide. We weren't even able to get within 10 miles of it. I don't know if the car is buried too, but I sure hope so. I hope it's all buried. Wow. Hope you guys enjoyed that compilation of scary, strange and downright treacherous encounters in the woods and wilderness. Of course, please do let me know down below in the comments as ever. Please do like and share. And above all, when you're out in a deep dark forest, keep your wits around you and your eyes and ears open. And remember, be safe, not sorry.